Kylam is very, very lactose intolerant. When he was younger, he found out that drinking milk would upset his stomach so much that he would spend the next few hours on the toilet. His secret, though, was that he would often purposely eat a tub of ice cream or a wheel of cheese because he enjoyed the feeling of having diarrhea explode out his butt. Some people have hobbies, and Kylam had an interest in pooping.
Spinal Palm's high school principal was the kind of woman to side with the popular students. Every year, she bullied him and the other unpopular students. Her main objective, to get them to drop out or move. One day, a teacher was pranking a girl at the school by taking her shoes and setting them outside. The girl and the teacher laughed about it, and then the girl went to retrieve her shoes. When she returned, the principal ran in and snatched her shoes, yelling, "I saw those outside! Those belong outside!" The girl tried to tell her that they were her shoes, but it was too late. The principal threw them far. Afterwards, the girl ran to retrieve her shoes, making sure the principal was not anywhere around.
When Hellbent was in high school, his parents had a German Shepherd named Trini, named after Trinity from The Matrix. One day, while Hellbent was painting parts of a model car, Trini jumped onto his bed. She promptly looked him in the eye, then pissed on his bed. That's right, Trini jumped on his bed with the intention of urinating on it. Hellbent's family still laughs about it.
The dumbest thing Sid ever did while drunk happened one night with his brother. He was going to tell him that he was going to bed, but being very drunk, Sid walked in the opposite direction. He ended up walking towards the swimming pool and fell in. As he fell in, Sid shouted,
"I love unicorns!"
After falling in, he just floated there. His dad drove in after him, His dad dove in after him, but Sid swam around while his angry dad chased him around the pool. Thanks to his huge hangover the next day, Sid told himself that he would never get that drunk again.
When Andy gets nervous, she bites off the skin around her nails. Not just her fingernails, but also her toenails. One day, she had to give an oral report in front of her class, which she was very freaked out about. Andy asked to go to the bathroom before giving a report, and the teacher said she could. So Andy walked down the hall in her new flowery sandals and ran into the bathroom. She ignored the fact that there were two other girls in there and quickly started to bite off the skin around her fingernails. Then Andy took off her sandals and started biting off the skin around her toenails. She looked up and saw the other two girls giving her horrified looks. That was when Andy bit down on her toe a little too hard, making it bleed. Mortified, she walked back to class and asked for a band-aid. The two girls from the bathroom knew Andy and told everyone what they saw her doing.
When Pringle was in 6th grade, his mom was picking him up from school. She pulled up and waited for Pringle to leave his classmates and start walking over to the car. Then she rolled down the window and started yelling, "Hey, it's my beautiful baby boy! Get in, get in! We have to go to your Uncle Wunkly's house. Oh, and hey, you didn't need more than 4 condoms, right? I know how you like your girls." Pringle assumes this was the result of his mom catching him masturbating a few days earlier.
Dolan had a co-worker at a doctor's office that would go into the bathroom and be there for about an hour, and then he would come out like nothing ever happened. One day, Dolan went into the bathroom to see what was he up to. The door slowly was pushed open, and it completely exposed his co-worker who was smuggling cocaine, which had been going on for a long time. The idiot had been sneaking drugs into the office in the bathroom for years, and no one ever knew. The man was fired on the spot, and the coke was confiscated.
Gogak's school is extremely strict on uniform, even on free dress days. One time, Gogak got sent home for wearing a red t-shirt to class. The principal told him that red is a gang color, so Gogak was obviously trying to start a gang war. Gogak explained that he hates gangs, but the principal didn't believe him. He said he'd seen Gogak holding up 2 fingers to make a gang sign that morning. Gogak explained that he was making a peace sign, but the principal wouldn't believe him and he got a suspension. When Honeybit's parents divorced, she started having some strange-ass dreams. One night she dreamt she was in an unfamiliar house looking for her mum. When she found her, her mum was crouched on all fours wearing a spiked collar. She had razor-sharp fangs and chased Honeybits up the stairs, barking at her as she went. Honeybits hid inside the nearest room and found Ginger, one of her friends from her old school. Ginger was standing there with her head bowed, not saying a word. She was holding a tray with a sheet over it. She slowly removed the sheet and revealed a shotgun. Ginger pointed the gun right at Honeybits. She screamed and tried to escape through a window, but something weird happened. The window and doors disappeared, leaving her trapped in an empty room with no way out. Honeybits then screamed and jolted herself awake. The creepy thing is, Honeybits had lots of memories of this Ginger girl, but her mum never knew anyone by that name. She claimed all these memories were just made up and just happened to intrude in her nightmares. So to this day, it still freaks Honeybits out.
When Spinal Palm was in 8th grade, he had a speech impediment, and while struggling with this, had his first crush. He was a shy kid to begin with, and while having this speech impediment, he didn't like talking at all. But speaking with her was hell. One time he screwed up bad when he tried to impress her. He gave her a plastic flower and tried to say,
"Your beauty is like a plastic flower, it'll never die."
but he ended up saying,
"You're plastic like a flower."
Right after that, he dug himself into a bigger hole by trying to constantly say sorry, but it was coming out as
"Sorry."
She ended up actually laughing and hugging him, saying that it was the sweetest thing that she's ever encountered.
Doopy used to work as a barista and had some weird regulars. One day, this woman walked in and stormed up to Doopy and yelled at her, "This hoe is sleeping with my husband!" Doopy turned bright red. Her boss came up and said, "Her?" The woman snapped, "You deaf? Yes, fire her." Doopy's boss laughed. "This girl right here is cheating with your husband. Are you serious? Lady, this girl couldn't sleep with your husband. This girl is not only a virgin. When we brought in strippers, she not only didn't bat an eye or flirt with any of them, but she told them to put their clothes back on. This girl is so innocent and pure that the other day I asked her if she knew what sex was, and she said, the dictionary defines. She knows only by books." The whole store had gathered around as Doopy's boss told the woman every way she couldn't sleep with her husband. Doopy was so scared and embarrassed that she went to the freezer and stayed in there for an hour to avoid customers. It turned out the lady's husband was one of their regulars.
When Captain lived in Eastern Europe, he got completely hammered when he went out drinking with some friends. Earlier, he brewed some really strong shit called hooch that he put into a gallon jug and chugged. Everything else was a blur, but his friend told him that he stole a goat, broke into his ex's place, and left it there. His friend also mentioned that Captain filled a bathtub with a few gallons of nacho cheese, sat in it, and said he was a human nacho. The next day, Captain woke up with a horrible hangover and felt miserable for the entire day.
Nixium went to the convenience store to buy some milk. The shopkeeper asked how Nixium was doing today, and Nixium said,
I'm fine. My ex-wife still misses me, but her aim is getting better.
The joke was pretty bad on its own, but it got even worse when the convenience store guy started crying. It turned out his wife had just left him and Nixium had just rubbed salt in his wound. It was just a bit awkward.
When I was very young, I used to ghost hunt in my house using an old video camera with night vision, as well as a tape recorder. I used to call out to see what would reply, and eventually, something did. After a series of yes or no questions, I learned that the spirit I had contacted was a young girl who I called Jenny. My friends would come over and spend the night sometimes, and I'd introduce them to Jenny and then laugh at how scared they'd become when I'd ask her to move an object or to make a noise. And then it happened. It was great. Well, eventually I fell out of the ghost hunting hobby, but when I was around 20 years old, I started to have these very weird dreams in my house. In them, I'd see a small girl hiding in the shadows of rooms in my home, watching me, and sometimes she would run at me, screaming in the darkness, as if trying to grab me. I didn't think much of it at first, but I'd keep having the same dream almost every week. This went on for about 4 months, until I grew so freaked out, I went and talked to a friend of mine who was much more experienced in this kind of stuff than I was. After a long talk, he asked me about Jenny, the spirit that I hadn't even thought of in years. But he told me that most likely Jenny was trying to make contact with me again for whatever reason. It was disturbing, I admit, but I followed his advice, and I calmly told her one evening while I was alone to leave me be and to stop entering into my dreams. And after that, the dreams just stopped completely. But the fact that Jenny had the ability to sneak into my head and project horrifying images into my dreams, it still disturbs me to this day.
A few years ago, I was living overseas and I didn't have a computer at home, so I was going to an internet cafe to play video games there. I hadn't been there for very long when someone came back to a computer after going out for a smoke. In the couple of minutes he'd been gone, someone else had taken his computer. And you know how nerds can be. That was his computer and he couldn't move. Within a couple of minutes, the other guy was standing up, they were shouting, getting in each other's faces, and then they started just fighting. Full-on fist fight. I had to get up and stop the fight, which I think might have damaged my kill-to-death ratio in the game, but, you know, it had to stop. They got kicked out and I'm pretty sure they got banned for life because that's what I'd do.
Slap Tam's bully was not actually a student. It was his 3rd grade teacher. She let the other students bully him. She once had him sit on a stage in the cafeteria to finish some work he could barely even understand how to do. Primarily because he's a fucking pig who doesn't have hands that can hold a pen, but I digress. She even left him behind in the classroom alone while she took all the other students to do fun activities. He'd cry every day and begged his mum not to send him to school. The worst part is, the school knew she was a bully and she got away with it anyway. It's okay though, Slaptam got his revenge when he shit in her car. Hey, you let a wild animal into school, what do you expect?
While Mikhailin was out camping and hiking with his family, his dad told him that when he's out in the wild, it's okay to use the bathroom outside. But Mikhailin was only 5 years old at the time, so he misunderstood and thought that it meant he could just go anywhere outside. So when they stopped for gas on the way home, Mikhailin got out of the van and peed right on the gas pump. For the next 30 minutes, his mother made sure he understood to not pee outside where people can see him, and even then, only in an emergency. What's the worst injury I had as a kid? It's kinda hard to pick a favorite, but anytime somebody asks me this question, one story in particular springs to mind. One day, my sister was at soccer practice, so I and all the other kids who weren't allowed on the soccer field decided to come up with our own game. The place was a big, boring open field with not much going on outside of one huge mound of dirt next to the parking lot. So at first, we decided to play a nice game of King of the Hill. Nothing too violent, just shoving each other down into the dirt. But halfway through the game, one kid noticed that the mound was full of these tiny rocks, just perfect enough to whip at each other and cause just a little bit of pain. So that started up a rock fight, which really wasn't that bad, at least not in my day. Problem was, nobody really decided on any kind of rules, like how do you win, how do you lose. It was just complete chaos. Some malicious act of violence was pretty much unavoidable. I mean, how is she supposed to win this game anyways? Well, one kid figured out how to win. She managed to find a huge chunk of asphalt. It must have weighed at least 8 to 10 pounds. A bit too heavy to throw, but not too heavy to bash me over the back of the head with it! I don't remember much about the actual impact, but I do remember grabbing onto a chain link fence and screaming, "Ah!" They had to pick out little chunks of asphalt from the back of my head and stitch me back up. But the worst part was they couldn't clean all the blood off of my Ninja Turtles backpack. The bleach would have taken out all the color. Still, credit where credit's due, she did win the rock fight.
In 9th grade, Nixium and his friends would play this incredibly complicated fantasy board game called Talisman in the school cafeteria before school started. Sometimes this arsehole would come by and swipe his arms across the table as he passed by, knocking everything to the floor, practically ruining the game for the entire morning. One day, Nixium got so pissed that he threw his social studies book from across the table and hit him in the forehead. He seemed ready to kick his ass, but instead, the bully told him to meet him in the empty field next to the school after class for a one-on-one. Confident he could kick his ass, Nixium agreed. At the end of the day, Nixium showed up, but so did 6 of the bully's friends. So he ran into the locker room, where there were lockers that were big enough to fit in a person, if the 2 shelves in the middle were pulled out. He pulled out the shelves and hid inside, but the group of assholes knew exactly where he was when they saw the taken out shelves on top of the locker. Instead of pulling him out, they put a combination lock on the locker and left. Nixium was there all night, pounding and screaming. With what little room he had to move, and after several hours of hard work, he managed to kick the bottom 9 or 10 inches of the door outwards, but it wasn't enough to slide out. But Nixium could slide his legs out and be able to sit down semi-comfortably. The next morning, the janitor freed Nixium, who then marched to the principal's office, where it was him that got into trouble for destruction of school property and trespassing after school hours. The principal gave him a week of in-school suspension in a tiny desk next to his office. The assholes didn't get anything. When Froggy was 18, her boyfriend would stand her up on almost everything. The excuse was almost always a made-up illness. It was so obvious it got a little pathetic after a while. Nobody could be ill that often. One day he was supposed to meet Froggy, and his excuse for cancelling was, "I fell over and hurt my knee." They broke up not long after that, and Froggy never looked back.
One time, Spences was walking past her school's basketball court when a huge fight broke out. Two kids she had never seen before started punching, spitting, and kicking the shit out of each other. Things turned really bad when one of the fighters took a huge bite out of the other kid's arm. Blood went everywhere, and the kid had to be taken to the emergency room. When Spences went over to ask what the fight had been about, she found out it was all over some stolen Pokemon cards. Both kids got suspended for fighting, but amazingly, they're actually friends now.
Back in 4th grade, Emoji loved to read books. Two bullies would constantly throw his books and cut his headphones every time he got new ones, but what really hurt was when they called him ugly. A few years later in 8th grade, there was a big dance for 8th graders. The people were begging him to go with them. One of the bullies that used to torment him in 4th grade asked to go with him, so he said yes. But he had a secret plan. The next night of the dance, Emoji showed up with his real date, and the bully watched and cried as Emoji kissed his date with a big smile on his face, really slobbered over his lips in revenge. Sweet, delicious revenge. When Nixium was in elementary school, there was this mean boy that would hit him and take his stuff. He had a crush on this new girl, and Nixium lied to her saying that the mean boy, he killed a puppy because she liked puppies and owns one. So she went over to the boy and kicked him and spat in his face and said, "Don't you come near me, you shitbag puppy killer." He cried and went over to the teacher, and since she was new, she got away with it. And Nixium also told the teacher that he was a bully. She became his best friend forever, and the boy never pissed them off again.
Jacob was about 10 years old, and there was a school field trip to the Boston Museum of Science. Just before they left to head back to school to get picked up, they went to the gift shop. And you know those little turntable stands with the little knickknacks or whatever? Well, this one had those little solar-powered name tags that flash. So Jacob took one with the name of a girl that he liked and gave it to her the next day. He took it when she went to the bathroom, so she didn't know. When Pringle was little, he had a strange theory about how babies are made. He believed to create a new life, people had to do a bunch of weird stuff with the opposite gender. And they had to do it in this exact order or it wouldn't work. First, the man and the woman had to sit down and hug for exactly 5 seconds. They then had to get up, kiss each other, then lay back down and cover themselves with a yellow blanket. It had to be yellow, otherwise they'd just be wasting their time. After that, the man and woman had to go straight to sleep. When they woke up, they'd have their very own screaming newborn. I date crazy women. Crazy women are fun. But one crazy woman broke up with me because I died in her imaginary world. See, she had this fictional type of world that exists outside of reality, mostly inside of her crazy head. And in that world, I died, so therefore she could not date me anymore. Deep down on the inside, I hope that was just an excuse to break up with me and not a real thing going on in her head. Because if it is, she's pretty crazy and I didn't do anything to help out. Well, not my problem anymore.
When civil Spider was 13, he told a joke at school that landed him in some very hot water. He'd heard the joke from his dad. So, get this, Civil Spider said. Barbara Bush was walking around the hospital when she came across a patient jerking off. The doc said the patient had prostate problems and this was the only way he could find relief. When they got to the next room, Barbara saw a nurse giving a patient a blowjob. She asked what was going on, and the doctor told her it was the same situation as the other guy, only this patient had better insurance. Civil Spider's friends all laughed their asses off, but the vice principal sitting behind him didn't find it so funny. Civil Spider ended up getting a week-long suspension, which he spent hanging out with his dad and learning more dirty jokes.
Pandora once got caught drawing real creepy and disturbing things at school, like blood, guts, weapons, and gruesome quotes. Some kid secretly went through a drawing book and found her pictures and screamed. He was so terrified and ran to the teacher to show her the drawings, and she also screamed. The counselor was immediately sent in to talk to Pandora, and all the adults looked at her like she was a psycho. They kept a close eye on her after that.
When Gergak was 18, he bought a bunch of booze with a fake ID. He got drunk for the first time and remembered watching a video about how it's illegal in North Carolina to have sex in a position other than missionary. So Gergak and his girlfriend decided to have sex in cowboy style. They kept the curtains pulled up and they recorded it. Later that night, they went out and saw a police officer. Gergak, still wasted, pulled up the video, got the officer's attention, and showed him. About the time the cop slammed his face into the roof of the patrol car and cuffed him, Gergak realized that law was actually enforced. He was in jail for about 2 days until he was bailed out.
Once when I was around 6 years old, I was riding my bike and I saw that my friends were playing tag with not one, but two of my crushes. I decided to join, and to impress them, I kicked everyone's butt at tag. My friend, though, got really jealous because she had a crush on them too. So to get back at me, she pulled down my pants, exposing my Barbie underwear to the whole world. I stood there in shock for about a minute before pulling my pants back up and biking home, in tears, of course.
McKylum worked the video game counter at a toy store in a mall back in 1999. On the counter next to him was a VCR TV combo, which played demo tapes they occasionally got from game manufacturers. One day, a woman brought in a fancy remote control airplane kit to be rung up because the regular counter was busy. McKylum rang it up and $200 popped up on the register. The lady had a fit and pointed to the $5 price tag on the obviously not $5 remote control plane. McKylum told her,
"Sorry, but we go by what the UPC tells us. My apologies if someone mistagged it."
That didn't deter the woman as she wailed and gnashed her teeth at him for over 20 minutes, saying,
"It's illegal to sell anything for any price other than what's on the sticker."
McKylum stuck to his guns and repeated that they only go by the barcode and not the sticker because he wasn't gonna let that bitch walk out with a $200 item for $5. Finally, his boss stepped up with 2 videotapes, popping one into the VCR TV and showing the security footage of her in the action figure aisle picking a tag off one toy. Then he took the tape out and stuck in the other one that showed her scraping the tag off the plane and sticking something in its place. Then he told her, "So I guess that's not you there, swapping out the stickers, thinking this would really work." She threw the plane on the ground and stomped out of the store. In doing so, she broke it, so they had mall security track her down. She ended up having to cough up the $200 for the now broken plane she tried to scam them out of.